Welcome to Life Science Marketing Radio, the podcast where marketing leaders inside and outside the sciences share their creative ideas and practical approaches to increasing your marketing ROI. Here's your host, Chris Connor.
Tino Chow is the founder and CEO of Giant Shoulders, a strategic branding agency that builds challenger brands for medtech VCs and startups that are bringing innovations to the market. Tino, welcome to Life Science Marketing Radio.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Excited to chat more.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to learning more about what you're doing, so that's how we're going to start. So tell us a little bit more about Giant Shoulders, what you're up to.
Yeah, so I generally like to start with my story. I often feel like a three-headed monster when I enter a room. Always the odd one out in one shape or another. So the three heads that I am, the first head is operations. I was in the military in Singapore and saw firsthand what good operations look like, why it matters, and specifically kind of how it actually kind of helps people go within systems. So naturally, the next thing that I did is to go to art school. So I went to Rhode Island design. Yeah, it's always an interesting conversation I have. I was like, yeah, I went to art school, and I often explain to people that there's actually a lot of commonalities kind of between kind of creativity and some of the most high-functioning teams and the most effective kind of military units. Kind of it's where you have those boundaries and you have the trust of people that you can truly be creative. So I didn't know that at the time when I went to Rhode Island School of Design. Got my degree in industrial design and graduated in 2009. So very much in the midst of the recession. And by the way, that was before Silicon Valley started hiring designers. That was when the first iPhone just came out. And also design thinking was still very much in its infancy. So I found myself as a designer kind of really trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do with my life. And this is kind of when a couple of my friends from Brown University came up with this idea. Why don't we talk to our heroes from all around the world who is doing amazing, impactful work? And by the way, we were students, so we didn't have the money. So we couldn't just fly all over the world to speak to them. And we came up with the next best thing, which is a conference. We invited them all to Rhode Island over 3 days and got to hear firsthand from them how they fell in love with the work that they did, how did they find it in the first place, and also the impact that they were creating. And that was when I had my aha moment. A lot of the speakers and a lot of these entrepreneurs were basically saying the same thing, whether so explicitly or implicitly, is that you can have the best product in the world that changes everything. And you can have the best marketing so that everybody knows about that product or service. However, outside of a sustainable business model, you'll never see the impacts that you want to create. And that completely kind of opened my eyes, and I found my purpose. That is what I want to do. So I had to learn kind of what business is, and what got me really interested is where innovation kind of meets business, which is entrepreneurship. And so a lot of what I've been doing for the last 15 years have revolved around kind of building brands, telling stories for a lot of these innovators and entrepreneurs who are trying to bring ideas to market. And by definition, if you're bringing a new idea to market, you're a startup, and as a startup, you have no credibility yet. So how do you overcome skepticism? And by the way, you're not just bringing an idea that already exists. You're bringing an idea that challenges someone. You challenge the status quo. You are kind of making people either kind of pissed off or question kind of why you should exist. So how do you use story as a key way of making genuine connection, building that trust, and also kind of how do you bring those ideas kind of to market, let them flourish and grow into the businesses that they are today to create impact. So that's basically who I am and what I do.
All right. So that's a lot. And I love it. I have two questions just out of my own ignorance a little bit. I mean, one, tell me more. I'm going to give them both to you just so I don't forget. One, what an industrial designer does, because that sounds, I mean, I think I know, but I'd be like interested to hear what the process is like, to become one. And then also people hire you and say, we're designing this thing, make it functional from the outside and the inside, I imagine. And then the other one is, how'd you get all those people to come to your conference when I imagine you're in that same boat? Like, why would they come talk to us?
Yeah, well, those are great questions. So I'll start with the easier one, which is industrial design. And industrial design, it's basically it's part product design, which is how the product looks, and it's a little bit of engineering as well as how the product works. And I think one thing that kind of wraps those two things together is how do you build the system around it so that the product can be manufactured.
Yeah.
So one of the things that product designers get critiqued a lot is like, well, yes, you made something beautiful, but it costs way too much to make, and we can't sell it profitably, so that thing cannot exist. And then you sort of critique, oftentimes kind of with engineers, it's like, yes, you solved the problem, but you solved the problem that you created in the first place. So sure, this works, but what is a different way of looking at the problem? What's a different way, or more systematic kind of way of thinking about it, where you are considering kind of your users, kind of your accountant who is like counting pennies on the back end, and also the marketing team, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of really where I got my training to kind of see things kind of holistically. And this is kind of where, when it comes to kind of building kind of startups and building brands for startups, is really helpful, because fundamentally startups pivot all the time. And without the holistic view of why we are doing what we're doing, how do you deliver kind of value, and understanding customers, you can't build an effective kind of brand. So I kind of found myself kind of actually translating a lot of my design training in industrial design into and mixing it with graphic design, because mostly people understand brand or know brand as like the visuals. How do we mix that in, and along with my kind of my newfound interest in entrepreneurship, how do you mix those things together? So anyway, so going back to industrial designer, we kind of are systems thinkers. We kind of look at a big picture.
Yeah. And then that conference, like, I imagine they came to hear from each other, but still, that's some good initiative and a brilliant idea, but also events are hard, I think.
Oh my goodness, it is absolutely hard. We thought we were going to do it for 1 year, and well, let's see, 2008 was the first time we did it, so this is the 18th edition that we're putting. Well, the students are putting on. Never thought in a million years that this would be an annual conference, and we built the conference around kind of just handing this off to the next generation of students, and answering questions that they were interested in asking. So, and I feel like I'm now kind of growing up, kind of maturing. Looking back, I'm like, yeah, of course, a lot of the folks that we invited, they were just so eager to help. They were so eager to share, especially kind of to the next generation, to the younger self that I was. And we were just asking oftentimes naive questions, but sometimes those questions are really important because no one else kind of think that it's appropriate to ask, and we just have no filters. Like, the world is our oyster. We'll just ask these questions, and in some ways, it is refreshing. And I oftentimes kind of, even with the work I do now, I try to kind of bring myself back to like, how do I approach problems with a beginner's mind? What is a naive question that maybe kind of somebody who is more experienced will be ashamed to ask, or like doesn't think that it's a question that is beneath them to ask. And this is kind of where I find that there's a lot of interesting engagement kind of when we do ask those questions and the answers that we get back, especially kind of when the 18 years ago, kind of with some of these kind of really interesting social entrepreneurs, business folks from all around the world, and they were so eager to share.
That's awesome. This for the younger people listening, or if you're earlier in your career, I'm going to recommend you keep listening to this episode and then go back a couple weeks when I talked to Joachim Ecoute, because he had sort of the same attitude. He and his buddies started a media company while they were still in school by riding their bikes around France and interviewing biotech CEOs and making a documentary out of the whole thing. And I thought, how'd you get these guys to talk to you? And you show up on a bike, they're going to give you some time.
Yeah.
Never be afraid to ask questions. It's the punchline.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I feel like that's definitely maybe a certain bravery or naivete that comes with youth that you should absolutely take advantage of it. Just ask questions. Be bold. Like kind of email kind of CEOs that you don't think that they would respond, and you will be surprised. And maybe that's advice that I should take today.
Exactly. I mean, we all think those people don't want to be bothered, or you're being a pain to ask them. And I assure you, as an older person, they like nothing more than being asked to share their wisdom. And they're happy to do it. All right, let's move on. So, in your experience coaching over 350 founders, what's the biggest mind shift they need to make to succeed in going to market mode?
Yeah, so a big part of our work outside of building kind of brands, kind of websites, logos, and it's really about kind of clarifying and distilling kind of who a company is, and also specifically at an early stage who the founder is. And I think of the biggest impact that I've made in kind of 350 founders that we have coached is really that aha moment that they have, the realization that they are not just selling their innovation, not just selling their idea, but they're selling themselves, and how important that is. And like I mentioned at the top of the show about how if you're a startup, by definition, you haven't earned any credibility yet. So how do you build trust? And oftentimes that is kind of built kind of human to human, and often it starts with the founder. Why did the founder start the company? Is it for money, or is it for kind of a love for technology, or is something that is deeply personal that they have experienced that they just find that it's no longer acceptable that this problem exists, and they're going to dedicate their life kind of to solving this. So all of that actually kind of are very powerful kind of triggers, and also kind of powerful connections that you can make, and oftentimes with investors. If you're starting a company, you need capital. Why should an investor trust you with their money? And a lot of that can be solved through kind of storytelling, sharing kind of how did you get to where you are, and why starting the company is that inevitable next step of that journey, and that you will not sleep until you solve that problem. So I often at times that is that mindset shift that kind of, once they realize, is like, oh, it's not just about whether or not statistically it can prove that my product is better than the next one, or my idea has merit. It comes down to whether or not I can trust you.
Nice. So you mentioned storytelling there. How do you go about drawing that story out of people who don't think of themselves naturally as storytellers? They think of themselves as inventors or business people or whatever.
Yeah, so one of the exercises that we do is called the superhero origin story. And we'll use a superhero origin story to demonstrate that. So let's take Pete Parker and Spiderman. So I'm sure kind of many of you are familiar with the story, but oftentimes kind of what we kind of get wrong in that story is that Peter Parker didn't become Spider-Man when the spider bit him. Because if you remember the story, and I know that there are different canons of the story and different versions of it, but most of the most common kind of like story of Peter Parker is that once he got that power, he was trying to figure out how to make money off of that power. He joined the circus, and it wasn't until there's always this kind of moment in that story where he let a robber kind of like go by. It's like, I'm actually not gonna get in the way. I'm not going to catch him. I'm gonna let him go by. And turns out that that was the guy who killed his Uncle Ben. And that was his aha moment. That was his turning point. That was when he found his purpose and found and became Spider-Man. So that's the almost like the arc of a superhero origin story, and maybe kind of your story and my story may not be as dramatic, but there's oftentimes kind of the thing that happens in your life, or maybe a build up in your life that you realize that you're going to take this leap of faith. This is what you're going to do, and you eventually kind of fell in love with this. And this is kind of the reason why the reason kind of why you do what you do.
There are so many layers in there that I have to point out for storytelling reasons. One, I mean, that is the story itself is a good one. Like, he was bitten by the spider, he gained some new capability, but that didn't make him a superhero. But the thing that caught my attention was how you started out, and you said most people have some idea of this story, but here's what they get wrong. You grabbed my attention by that. Like, you said, what? I think I know this thing, but you're going to tell me something? And it's true. Like, we forget about that. You just say, oh, you got bit by a spider, and now they make the leap to he is Spider-Man. But that's a critical moment in that story. Like, no, it's not just what you can do. It's your choice of how to use it.
Yeah, and I think even in that story, and I think with a lot of people, including myself, is like there is some kind of struggle, like in that story, right? Like Peter Parker, that's that struggle of like, oh, if I have not let the robber go, my Uncle Ben will still be alive. And I think of a lot of us, like, there are these forks in the road kind of moment where we made one choice over another that sometimes in the moment we don't know that it was a blessing in disguise. But when we look back, like those moments really can build us up and make us who we are. And all of those kind of moments kind of added up. It helps build trust. It's like, oh, you're not just somebody who just found this kind of industry because we can make a lot of money in life sciences. So I got into it, and I kind of heard about this technology, and I kind of saw kind of dollar signs, and I went into it. And oftentimes, like, this raises a bit of a flag for a lot of investors, where it's like, well, if you're only in it for the money, when the going gets tough, how can I trust you to go around that obstacle, go over the obstacle, demolish the obstacle, or are you just going to give up? So and on a very human level, that's what a lot of investors and also partners kind of look for, is like, are you the one who is going to persevere even when the going gets tough?
Yeah, I think we might come back to that a little bit. But my next question is, you already described yourself as a three-headed monster based on your time in the military. So tell us a little bit more about that. How did that time, and I have to, this is going to be a silly question. Do I say the Singaporean army or the Singaporean army? How would you say it?
Singaporean.
Okay. I learned many things today, but now I know I won't mess that one up. So how did your time in the Singaporean army influence how you approach brand building and startup coaching?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I feel like if you ask anyone who have military experience, I think how many people will tell you that it comes to help and sometimes haunt you in ways that you don't expect. I think in my case, it definitely kind of helped me kind of think through how discipline and leadership actually kind of coincides with creativity and with branding and storytelling.
Yeah, so we're talking about the military, and you know, it might be surprising to people that discipline and creativity can go together. Maybe here's a phrase that I've heard It applies to music and a lot of other things as well. Like
Yeah.
creativity thrives in a container. Like when you have boundaries on what you can do,
Yeah.
then that's when you have to be creative.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is something I mentioned kind of at the top in my intro, that I've had debates kind of with a lot of people around kind of the highest functioning kind of military units are also the most creative. And it really comes down to a couple of things. So discipline is one, and kind of in the military, you train and train and train and train until it becomes second nature. And really what it does is that it frees up kind of your brain to react and to be present in the moment and to be able to improvise. I think that's similar to kind of music as well, as you brought up, kind of like, I don't actually play music kind of myself, but I've heard, especially like with jazz, once you master the basics, the fundamentals, you can now improvise. And that's where kind of the magic happens. And I think how that is the same way kind of in the military. It's the same way in branding and any kind of form of creativity, that you're not thinking about like, well, do I put the brush stroke over here? Do I play this note? Do I say this? It just comes out naturally because of the discipline that you have put in to your training. So I think how there's a lot kind of there. And then I think kind of another thing kind of with discipline that kind of really helps is that in the military, we don't ever kind of like not wait, but we never rely on a single person's genius to win a battle. It's always through kind of discipline and tactics and strategy. And strategy would eat kind of genius kind of every day of the week. And the same thing kind of in the work that we do. And even though we do creative work, we make it very clear to our clients that we have a very strong process. The process is what's going to help you solve the problem, not a moment of genius, not someone who can come into a room and magically solve everyone's problems. It's always kind of through process.
Okay, I'm going to throw back another music analogy at you, and sort of. I mean, the process in music, it's practice, right? It's not a new guitar. Right?
Yep.
That thing isn't going to make you sound like Jimi Hendrix. A new piece of gear is never the answer. It's, learning to use what you have. So that's my pitch for process.
Yeah, absolutely.
We spoke before, and you talked about settling the audience's lizard brain. I think that we're talking about, giving a pitch to investors. So
Yeah.
how do you know when that's working? Like, one, how do you make it happen? And then how do you know it's working?
Absolutely. So let's take one step back in terms of kind of how do we kind of build an emotional kind of relationship kind of with your audience. And imagine if you're on stage, maybe at a demo day, if you have a startup and you are given 3 minutes. So how do you kind of build that relationship, build trust? And as we kind of like talked a little bit about this earlier around you don't have credibility yet, how do you tell the origin story? And that might take up all 3 minutes. So there's a couple of things kind of we coach our founders to do. And to understand how this works, I want to kind of like go on a slight detour to talk about kind of the two parts of your brain. So the two parts of the brain that kind of matters most in communications is your paleomammalian brain, or the lizard brain, and your neocortex. So the neocortex, kind of as the name suggests, it's the newer part of your brain. That's kind of where it governs language and also logic. I think a lot of us focus a lot of time on that. Is this logical? What are the words do we say to make sure that the idea comes across as information dense as possible? Because we believe that the more information that we provide, the more convincing it is. However, what the other part of the brain, the lizard brain or the paleomammalian brain, does is that it governs kind of decision making. And this is kind of, and also kind of something that kind of we say often in our kind of common language is that, oh, my gut feels. Even though everything that you said is logical, my gut says no. I don't know why, but my gut says no. Sorry to break the news to you that your gut doesn't actually think, but that is what your lizard brain kind of sending signals kind of to you. And this is kind of sometimes where you kind of get the hair standing in the back of the hair standing in the back, standing up on your back when you kind of encounter a moment of like, this doesn't feel right. I don't know why, but maybe I should get out of here. So it's taking a lot of kind of subconscious information and kind of helping us kind of like giving us kind of signals in terms of should I go ahead or not go ahead. And oftentimes this is kind of what is stopping an audience from trusting you. And so when you boil it down, it's basically your fight or flight instincts. When an audience doesn't know who you are and why are you standing up on stage kind of talking to us, and how you're related to the problem or the solution, I cannot trust you yet. So I'm going to take everything that you say consciously or subconsciously with a grain of salt. And we're like, yeah, is that really true? Like, where do you get that information from? And so it stops us kind of from engaging kind of with our lizard brain, where where decisions happen. It's like yes or no. So this is kind of why, kind of with a lot of training, kind of we start with kind of that origin story, helping kind of founders understand the power of their narrative and why they do what they do matters. So on stage, and I'm going to go back to like if you have 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or even an elevator pitch, the best use of your time isn't to go into the deep tech of how it works. The best use of time is actually sharing kind of why you're so passionate about what you're doing, and how that's connected oftentimes to the problem that you're trying to solve. So that is kind of how it can help address and settle the audience's lizard brain, and helps all of the logic take hold, and instead of bouncing off of their brains because they don't trust you.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, you dive into the logic part and they don't trust you yet, it's not going to stick. But if you tell them that the reason you exist, what you're trying to do, that's an attention getter, and even if you run out of time, they're likely to want to know more, right?
Yeah.
All right. Do you have an example of a time when someone who might have been resistant to storytelling, and then how they overcame it? What finally convinced them that this is the way to go? Or any generic example.
Yeah. So I feel like I'm lucky enough that I get to work with a lot of very reputable incubators and accelerators. So they give me credibility. And also, by the way, they're in a program, so they can't say no. So I have a captive audience. But we still have to convince them that this is a good use of their time. And I think a lot of the folks that we help are technical co-founders. So this does not come naturally to them. And also, by the way, kind of like this is a learned skill for me too. I kind of had to learn the hard way of kind of thinking that if I build the product that's good enough, I open the doors and people will show up. And how wrong was I? So those definitely kind of learned skill in terms of how to communicate and how do you build trust kind of quickly, because you want your investors to fund you now and not 5 years from now. So I think kind of there's a lot of resistance kind of really stem from kind of just the kind of the technical kind of background of a lot of the founders who we work with. So a lot of times they're like, well, if I tell people if I give people the data, they will know how valuable it is. And this is kind of where we start to have the discussion or debate. And I was like, well, if you just present the data to 10 people, are they all going to come to the same conclusion? And the answer is always No, like some people come to a different conclusion thinking that your product or your solution or your innovation is doing something else. And so kind of that's often where comes the mindset starts to shift of like, you need to control your narrative. You need to tell people kind of where you are going and how the data supports where you're going. You welcome kind of people to challenge you and to have a conversation, because if they're challenging you, you are building trust by talking to them. And so then the thing that we have already talked about is like, well, how do you get people to start talking to you and trust you to have the conversation? And that's the origin story. So yeah, so that's kind of how all those kind of pieces come together. And sometimes it takes kind of a little bit longer for people to kind of really warm up to what we're trying to do. And I think sometimes it helps when they fail to raise money, and either the VC that's backing them, or kind of one of these kind of programs. Like, you really need to talk to Tino and Giant Shoulders. They have helped a lot of people kind of go through the same thing. I think you'll find this really, really valuable.
Yeah, that's a nice place to wrap up. I like that whole idea about when people start to challenge you. First of all, they obviously think it's worth their time to ask. So if you position yourself in a way that you're open to questions and considering those things, that's a trust builder right there, as opposed to saying, no, look at my data. And like,
absolutely.
So Tino Chow, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for all those insights. And I will, of course, put a link to your LinkedIn and Giant Shoulders in the show notes for this episode. And hopefully anybody interested can reach out.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for having me on your show. This was really fun for me too.
My pleasure. Hey, if you're still listening, that tells me you enjoyed the podcast. But don't tell me, tell your friends, and I'll be back soon with another episode. Okay, you can tell me too. Send an email, chris@lifesciencemarketingradio.com. Bye-bye.